Hey, how's it going? Parker Walbeck here with Full-Time Filmmaker, and today I'm joined by my brother, Dakota Walbeck, who runs our other business, Course Creator Pro. And today we're going to be sharing with you our top 10 tips to talking to a camera or directing others on how to talk to a camera.
Whether you yourself do a lot of talking in front of a camera or are mostly behind the camera trying to coach others on how to act natural, these tips will help your subject look, sound, and feel more natural and engaging on camera.
Now, keep in mind, we don't execute these tips perfectly ourselves, but with a lot of practice, we've both come a long way from where we started a few years ago, and we have a lot of our students in our courses asking our tips on how they can feel more comfortable and look more natural on camera. So we're now going to share with you some of our insights that we've gathered that has helped us over the years. And if you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about creating your own tutorial content and how to profitably create, market, and sell your own online course, make sure to check out Course Creator Pro, or to learn more about the video production side of things, make sure to check out our Ultimate Online Film Course, Full-Time Filmmaker. Links are in the description below. But without further ado, here are our top 10 tips to comfortably and naturally talk to a camera.
Now, overall, the goal you should have when talking to a camera is to try and replicate a natural conversation. This does take practice, but you have to train your mind to pretend you're talking to another human. If you act like you're speaking to a cold, robotic piece of camera equipment, then you will come across as cold and robotic. So with that being said, tip number 1 is eye contact. If you're reading a teleprompter, the tendency is to never break eye contact with the lens. And if you're speaking off the cuff, the tendency is to rarely look into the lens and be looking all over the room. Both are unnatural. In a normal conversation, breaking eye contact occasionally helps the other person from feeling like you're intensely staring into their soul. But rare eye contact shows disinterest or insecurity. In our tutorials, like right now, we are often reading from teleprompts. So what I'll try to do is read my scripts a few times beforehand so that I know what it says. That allows me to look away from the teleprompt occasionally and not lose my train of thought. Or if I ever mess up on a sentence, I'll redo it, but now that the sentence is fresh in my mind and basically I have it memorized, I will re-say it, but this time break eye contact with the lens.
Now, if you don't use a teleprompter, there are plenty of times where I do tutorials off the cuff, and I tend to look down on the floor frequently as I'm gathering my thoughts, and so I've had to train myself every time I look at the floor to tell my brain to look back up at the camera. One of the most natural times to look away from the camera, though, is when you're looking at something that you're talking about. That helps the viewer know where they should be looking too, so try not to stare at the floor unless you want your viewer to also stare there as well.
And that brings us to tip number 2, facial expressions. If you don't express a variety of emotions on your face, you will look dead. You can watch me and see what I do with my eyebrows and mouth to try and emphasize and express certain emotions. But this is going to be different for everyone. It depends on your content, your personality, your audience, and all sorts of other factors. But if you watch your video back and notice that you look boring, this is usually a good place to start. It may feel forced at first, but generally what feels over the top is actually what looks good and normal on camera.
Moving on now to tip number 3 is body language. Moving your body or your hands is huge. If you aren't using eye contact, facial expression, and body language, then you might as well record a podcast or an audiobook. The whole point of recording video is so that you can see something besides your mouth delivering words. A good drill is to turn off your audio on your videos and just watch yourself. How engaging do you look? Just by watching yourself, does it make you want to turn up the volume and see what you're saying? Or does it look boring like you just keep on scrolling if you were to see that in your feed? You can do so much with body language to help your audience visually see what you are saying. For example, if I'm talking about something small or big, or talking about the rule of thirds, or the depth of this image, or a numbered list like the fact that we're currently on tip number 3, or pointing to the screen where I know I'm gonna have some text pop up, or just emphasizing a general phrase like anytime I say, I don't know, my hands naturally come up and my shoulders shrug. The physical expression of you presenting your content is literally half of the viewing experience, which brings us to our next tip.
Tip number 4 is vocal tonality and voice volume. This is the audible part of your presentation. Naturally, you vary the inflection of your voice when you speak to a person. If you're asking a question, you'll end the sentence in a higher note. Or, I just increase the volume of my voice and the tone to emphasize that I'm moving on to a next point. If your thought or sentence is ending, you'll generally end the sentence in a lower tone. This is also important for cutting in the editing room. It's really hard to splice together different thoughts if you are always ending the sentence on a high note, because then it just feels like a bunch of run-on sentences versus starting and finishing your thoughts. Also, be careful when presenting on camera. People have a tendency to start the sentence really loud and then slowly get quieter until the last few words, which causes the sentence to barely be audible. Just because you're lowering the tone of your voice towards the end of a sentence doesn't mean you need to also also lower the volume of your voice. Avoid mumbling those last few words of the sentence and really focus on finishing the sentence strong with good volume and good enunciation. Watch your videos back and take notes on inflections and volume adjustments that should have been there, but you forgot to because you were occupied reading a script.
Moving on now to tip number 5 is cadence. The best way I can explain this is with music. If you look at a piece of sheet music or even just listen to a song, the speed at which those notes are played and how long they are played is constantly changing. If you played your favorite song and each note had the exact same length, all spaced out equally apart, the music would lose a lot of its life. The same thing applies when you speak. If you want to emphasize a certain word, then you'll drag out the cadence to be longer to show that that word is very important. If every word just had the exact same cadence, then you'd start to sound like an automated telephone operator, and we all know how engaging it is to listen to one of those. And yet, that's how most people sound when they read a script. If you catch yourself doing that, no shame in redoing that line over again. Now that that sentence is fresh in your mind, you can now say it more naturally, and therefore make your content much more engaging.
Which brings us to tip number 6, variety. The next issue we see when people begin to try and intentionally implement all this stuff we just suggested is they fall into patterns of repetition. They'll use the same arm movement over and over again. They'll use the same tonal patterns, ending the sentences the same way every time. And these are all common mistakes, especially when you're just beginning to throw new things into your repertoire. The goal here is to have a bunch of little tricks for different situations so you can add enough variety that people don't notice patterns. Because even if you do everything else we mentioned, if people recognize obvious patterns, it will still come across as calculated and robotic.
And tip number 7 is to get in a comfortable position. If you feel like you're sitting or standing awkwardly, then chances are you probably look awkward. Some people feel more comfortable standing when they talk, like our team member Landon, by the way. He prefers to stand versus sit when he's talking to the camera. Other people I know feel more comfortable when they can pace and move around the room. I personally feel more comfortable sitting, and preferably with a desk in front of me. A lot of YouTubers don't have desks in front of them, but I feel awkward when I'm just sitting with my arms at my side. So I prefer to have something to lean on. So I'll typically rest one of my arms or both arms like this so that I feel more casual. This helps me feel relaxed, which helps me present more naturally. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Do what feels most comfortable to you, as this will help you be and feel more natural on camera.
Now, tip number 8 is give 150%. And what this means is if 100% is what feels natural to you, you need to push that over the top. More energy, bigger expressions, extra of everything we just mentioned. A good rule of thumb is if it feels over the top and kind of silly when you're filming, it will come across as natural and more engaging in the video. You got to realize that you're basically acting. You are a presenter. Now, you don't need to change your personality, you just need to exaggerate it. Start off by going way over the top. Go 200, 300%, then watch yourself back and analyze what adjustments you need to make and figure out where that good balance is of being high energy without being too much for your personality.
And tip number 9 is to practice. There's no way around it, folks. No shortcuts, no easy way to get good at anything. The only way you're going to be able to find that sweet spot between bland and robotic and weird and obnoxious is to practice over and over and over again. If you're struggling feeling comfortable on camera, my first piece of advice is always going to be to put in more time practicing. Also, don't be afraid to do retakes while filming. I'll often say a sentence 4 or 5 times until I shape it exactly the way that I want.
Oh my freaking heck.
Typically, when I'm editing in the editing room, I find that I film twice as much footage as the length of the final video. So a 10-minute video usually takes 20 minutes to film. That's a lot of mistakes and retakes, but the more you practice, the easier it will get. But have a couple things you're going to focus on with each new script.
And lastly, tip number 10 is to be authentic. You don't want to get rid of your personality. What works for some people may not work for you. Parker is a lot more boring and low-key than someone like Peter McKinnon, and that's okay. He gets plenty of comments of people saying they don't like his low energy style and others saying that they like it more than the higher energy creators. Parker's personality is more introverted and low key, and Peter's is more extroverted and high energy. Different personalities will connect with different audiences, but what rarely connects with people is inauthenticity. So don't try and be something you're not. Just work on your skills until you become the best version of yourself. Everyone is going to discover new tricks and tips that work for them because there is no one way to do this. Yes, you may need to make some adjustments and polish a few sharp edges, but you want people to connect with you and the information you have to say.
So there you have our top 10 tips to talking to a camera. Neither of us are perfect at this, guys. Hopefully those tips will help you improve your videos. And for those of you who are usually behind the camera, hopefully this gives you some good things to look for when you're directing talent on camera to help them feel more comfortable and look more natural. Now, if you'd like to learn more tips on creating engaging content, specifically online courses, Dakota and I run a course called Course Creator Pro that walks you through how to create course curriculums, how to build the infrastructure and sales funnel, how to effectively market it, how to run social media ads, and how to scale a business. So if you're interested in learning more, make sure to click right over here to learn more about how we successfully build and run online courses. And as always, make sure to check out Full-Time Filmmaker to learn more about how to improve your video skills. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you have any further questions, please let us know. Is when you're looking at something that you're talking about. What is this? And how to profitably.
If you act like you're speaking to a breaking eye contact occasionally keeps
But if you never look at them, but if they never look at you, that can come across as disinterested. Before you film a session, write it down, take mental notes, whatever.